Yo, what's up guys? Let's talk about Dark Aragorn. Is he overhyped or is he actually freaking OP? So for the skills that we do have, we have skill 1, which is going to be branding with damage from max HP. Skill 2 is going to be increasing the attack power of an ally with the highest attack, teaming up with that ally, and then also dealing 2 times damage for your defense. But this skill has a little bit of a butt to it, but I will talk about that in a second. Then also we have Oathbreaker skill 3 is attack the enemy, reset the attack bar on one specific enemy. Afterwards you will attack all enemies for 3 times to decrease their cooldown by 3 turns potentially, because it's a 3 times multi-hit. And then we also have a slow or seeded on that. And we also have max HP scaling. So let's look at the scaling number. For the scaling we have over here, it's a 1.7 and a 0.19 on this. Maybe that doesn't say you too much, but let's compare that to, let's say, a Chandra. Chandra has a 1.1 and a 0.18. Keep in mind, Chandra is a guaranteed crit, so he does do a little bit more in the scaling than a Chandra, but Chandra does have the guaranteed crit, so therefore can be built on crit damage, which you most likely aren't going to be doing on this unit right here. Skill 2 is full attack scaling, which actually makes it a little bit worse right there. But okay, then we have the skill 3, which is a 0.11 on HP. Let's compare that to a Carnal, and Carnal is a 0.1 on HP. So technically he does do more damage than a Carnal on his skill 3. And they do actually have similar base HP as one another. So he has potentially the same amount of damage output on that skill 3, or even more damage output on that skill 3 than the Carnal has if you were to put crit rate / crit damage on him. For other stats, he does have Awakening into Accuracy, so if you want to put some damage to him, it's most likely on crit rate, but you could go for crit damage, but you definitely do want to max out your accuracy. Where does this unit fit most? Well, probably Siege. I could make the argument for Arena Offense, but mainly RTA. And in Siege, I can try out any unit, so let's do that. So how would we use that in Siege? Well, we're fighting the most typical team that I'm always fighting. In this case, the increased cooltime doesn't have that much value. Sure, the cooldowns increases on these two are nice. This one is okay, but your skill 1 is still decent, and your skill 1 is actually the same because you have a passive. So most of the time, you would actually like to use this against longer cooldowns that you can decrease. Also in the form of Siege, I would like him to do some damage as well. He doesn't have any pushback, so you could add pushback in the unit right next to it. But you also have to go for AoE strips first. He does also have HP lead, so with that HP lead, he can add a little bit more damage. So for that strip, most typically, it's going to be a Tiana. And then for the armor break, what would we like for an armor break? Of course, I could go Nefties, but let's go something a little bit more reasonable. Let's just try out Meddling Cookie, because Meddling Cookie does also have damage according to your max HP. So we have a little bit more of his HP scaling in there and in you right now. So let's see if that actually does work out. So in the case of Siege, since it is a multi-hit, I'm not going to care as much about the accuracy, but I'm just caring about doing as much damage as possible. And this looks like a decent set for it. We do also have a little bit of enhanced sets on you, and then just a normal typical speedy set on you. Let's see how much damage output you potentially have. Of course, for RTA, you're definitely not going to go for a rage set. You're way more likely to go for a typical Vio set or anything like that. But just to see the idea of how much damage this can do on a death break right now. So we're doing about 5k per hit, which is actually a little bit less than expected. So he's definitely not really a damage dealer. It also even barely feels like he was doing anything. So, okay, damage build on him, probably not the way to go. Also, one interesting thing about this skill is you do see that for the animation, she moves with her skill before he moves. He can place a death break, which is kind of nice on an attack buff Tiana in this case, but his death breaks come after. So since the death break was already landed over here, it is nice. But you will see very commonly that the unit you team up with is doing its attack before both chances of death break from him. So sure, he can place death break and he does team up, but it's not like Siren where Siren death breaks before your ally that is attacking with. But you do lower the cooldowns and those kind of things. So it does kind of show where I would say doesn't really seem like a unit that you want to be building crit rate / crit damage to, because for these amount of stats, doing 7k per hit, it's not really that much. So with that said, I think he's more of a debuffer in the sense of the slow pushback and cooldown increases and increasing your band of blades. So it looks more like an RTA unit. But is he actually OP in RTA? That is the real question. On the side over here on Luxec.gg, we can already check all units. So let's check him out. And we can already see he's been picked in G3 for just 28 times, so definitely not that much, but its win rate is not that high. How about in lower ranks? In lower ranks, he's actually doing not that bad, and the lower the rank goes, the better he does. However, I think he needs very strong setup to actually work, and I did fight against one player that actually had a lot of this strong setup. So let's watch a few of those replays. So I've been fighting Raider a few times, does have a Nephthys, does have a Laura, does have a, well, Zibala, most people have that, also do have a Light Gojo, so does have a lot of value for adding in a lot of cooldown decreases, but also cooldown increase, because both Zibala and the Aragorn Dark do have a cooldown decrease on the enemy, but a cooldown increase on your ally. And I did fight him a few times, so let's look at a few of those matches and let's actually see where it was strong, where it was not strong. So he was pretty much spamming this unit. At this point, I was going for more turn 2 style. I'll keep it at like a fast pace. In this case, you could say it's like, oh, Douglas should be able to kill this whole team, right? Well, kind of. In this case, I was able to clear it off or like semi-fast. We do have the same heals coming in, which are pretty nasty. But you would say like, hey, his fight is going to be pretty bad. Well, there's one thing. He does also give an attack buff on your ally. So that makes it where hitting the Douglas is a little bit better. Plus, he also has that death break that you now have on this unit on the left. So Oathbreaker pushbacks once again. So my cooldowns, my pony did not get to switch that often because, well, cooldown increases all the time from both units. Band of Blades once again. So the both of them are actually giving back the cooldowns. Plus also the Seimei was giving back the cooldowns. This thing was nearly having all cooldowns all the time. Did not go for a counter from my Douglas over there, which is kind of bad. So once again, the AoE hit. Most likely, you would just want to put as much as additional damage artifacts to it. You don't really want to go for anything along the lines of crit rate or crit damage. You just want to go high additional damage artifacts because in the end, your S2 multi-hits, your S3 multi-hits. So we do take it out right now, and we do take that one out from now. But then you might be like, okay, we're kind of done from there, right? Well, not necessarily, because the Seimei can still revive a unit. And with reviving a unit, you cannot actually go for the counter. Also, having the brand on the skill 1 is pretty nasty because it makes the availability of doing a 7k crit from a unit like that. So that's just simply where he takes me out. So is an interesting unit by also having the value on the skill 1 for putting a brand in there. But now let's say that he gets his full team off. Let's showcase how that works if he can actually get his full team cycle thing off, because it is definitely a pretty nasty combo. So we have the Laura going in over here, do get some counters in. He goes for a magical time, freezes wrong element, which is pretty bad. Then can push that back. Did actually not land the pushback on the monkey. If he did land the pushback on the monkey, I would have had a really bad take on it. But from here, you can get the death break in there. It's just really nice. But I would say he's good, but he also needs a lot of setup to be good. Because without that a lot of setup, I don't think he's doing as much. You need good AoE strips in front of it. You need something that's semi-useful to give the attack buff counter thing to. And lowering his cooldowns is also pretty nice because by itself, his cooldowns are kind of long. And the more skill once you have to do on it, the worse that unit actually is. I also had a few matches where I was able to best that, so let's check those out as well. So definitely a lot of more passive play because the man is actually crazy fast. So I could not really handle his speeds over there. But yeah, let's just see what he has over there. Did actually not manage to strip there, so I could get my skill off. Right away, he has to start hitting the Diana because that's the highest value target for him. So now he has to start hitting everything on the Diana. And that's actually kind of what you saw over there. The Death Break came in after the Chow hit. So the Chow doesn't have a good chance to hit on the Death Break. And that just really reduced the damage. I had a lucky proc over there by removing the Death Break over there. I was expecting it. This looked lower HP the moment I was fighting it. But that was actually a bad thing to not kill it right away. But yeah, I think next to a Zibala, the cooldown of it is pretty low, and then it's also lowering the cooldown of something else. But I think in a normal fight, he's having a bit long of cooldowns, and him having too long of cooldowns makes him where he's not that strong. Plus, sure, cooldown increases are nice, but we're still playing a meta which is very passive heavy. So therefore, you only have S2 to increase the cooldown off, and S2 in most cases isn't that strong for resetting cooldowns because they're shorter on cooldowns. So if we check some matches of other people just to see how they would play with it, but it's definitely really bound to having strong pairs. Like definitely a Gianna is super strong with that because then you have the strip coming in. You gotta land that on the Aragorn. Ooh, does not go for the Aragorn. This is definitely a position that if you get stunned, if you get stripped, and your enemy doesn't focus that much on passives, this thing will definitely take over the match. And from here, we also have the cooldown decrease on this unit, which is a cooldown decrease on the unit that also has self-cooldown decreases itself once again. So therefore, the skills of this unit is going to come very fast. Only thing you have in RTA, which is a little bit bad, is that it's not always the right unit you would like to put in the team up. And it's just going to team up with whatever unit is on the highest attack. Sure, you can kind of utilize that and say which one it's going to be. But if they ban that specific unit, you don't always have that exact backup that you then want to be putting that on. But in this match, it definitely does show pretty strong. But then again, it is also utilized by the enemy only having one passive unit. Well, the Chow is also passive unit, but that one doesn't care as much because the Chow needs setup to kill anything. Josephine, it definitely did care. But as long as you push that back, it is really strong. So once again, next to a Gianna, I think Gianna is probably the best pair on the Dark Aragorn there is. Because it is a strip with a stun. And strip with a stun is probably the highest value to right away after, then move on your things. Ooh, that's a pretty big miss. But we do also have the Hey Gang moving after that. So at least we have a backup strip. That's really good. Let's just speed this up because I think it's a little bit of a longer fight. So we have the ult coming in. He did actually go for the ult hit itself on this one, which is not a great target because the will rune was still in there, or the immunity was still in there. It is actually really strong. Yeah, no, next to Gianna, it's super strong because pretty commonly your Gianna's going to be... Yeah, I think that this thing by far has the strongest pair on Gianna. Mainly because Gianna's most likely the highest attack target, therefore you lower the cooldowns on your Gianna, and Gianna has potential on her skill 1 to gain a little bit of attack bar. This is one of those moments that if I were to pull this unit, I would maybe be opting for a crit rate Gianna once again, because that actually looks pretty busted to get your skills back and to get a lot of value out of it. And that's a nasty... But man, some of these people in lower ranks, while lower ranks, it's pretty decent high rank still, they have crazy LD draft. So let's see what we do have over here. We actually have no will runes on this unit. Interesting right there. So we have this coming in. In this case, also the highest attack target would probably be you. But Oathbreaker's coming in. A lot of cooldown resets. Cooldowns on these are pretty nice. We do have the immunity seeded from all of these units. And I think we would have the skill from you available. Also, you can put Thread State on it. It's a super tanky unit. So yeah, definitely do think it's strong. But I also do think it's kind of utilized by having the right pairs with it. If you don't have the right pairs with it, it's a lot weaker. Or if you simply get outsped, which I do think happens in this case, it is a lot weaker as well. So do I think that this thing is the most OP thing out there? Wouldn't necessarily say so. But is he really strong and very usable and probably the best LD from the current collab? Yes, I would definitely say so. He definitely does feel like the best collab unit right now. Is he on the level as a light Hwoarang on the moment of release? I wouldn't necessarily say so. Light Hwoarang on the moment of release did not really need that much of a pair and he was destroying whole teams by itself. I don't really see this unit doing that. It's more of a support slash... how do you say it? Not necessarily CC, but disrupting the enemy in a certain way kind of unit. Rather than it's like, I'm gonna destroy your whole team. And yeah, that's actually playing full dark into Indras. That is a dangerous game. Also right now, in this case, that is also really bad. Like your whole S2 was wasted because you used your S2 on a target that was stunned. Which doesn't make all too much sense, right? So there's definitely a few downsides to this unit. He doesn't have that much damage output himself outside of additional damage multi-hits. His S2 is a little bit weird for putting Death Break, but putting the Death Break after your ally did hit before. And of course, the S2 is also not fully on HP scaling. Plus, cooldowns are a little bit on the long side. So we definitely do see potentials where it's not doing that well. Also into will runes or just... shields, or just, well, mainly wills. Like wills, immunities, those kind of things. Over here, you do get your skills off right now. You do get that skill off, yes. But then we increase cooltime, but that's the right counter right there, Riley. Riley doesn't give a shit. So right now, what are you going to do? Like, sure, you do near to no damage. So that's the big issue. Like, you have a nice rotation sitting on over there and that kind of stuff, but you can't even kill that because you actually don't really have that much damage output. And I think that is the main issue. It doesn't have that much damage output, and I think that's where it can start losing. Because if he killed that unit right there, he had a better matchup. But also, strongest counter out there, Riley is definitely a very, very strong counter. So, do I see this unit absolutely taking over the battlefield, which we have seen with the Light Hwoarang? No. Do we see this unit getting a buff because it's not strong enough? I also don't think so. He is definitely very usable. He's definitely very strong. I would not necessarily fully spam him though. It's more of like a 4th or 5th pick in my opinion, especially if the enemy has longer cooldowns. Let's say that you're fighting Shizuka, you strip the Shizuka, you long time cooldown, increase it. Those kind of things. Most of the time Shizuka is paired with ignored defense units. You can increase the cooldown on those. And then it's a very, very strong unit. Plus, I think next to a Gianna, a very strong pair as well. So that's my verdict on this unit. Guys, thanks a lot for watching for this one. We're going to do the light Legolas as well. Light Legolas is also definitely not as strong as the Aragorn, but I've seen some potential for it. So that's going to be a future video. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. See you as always in the next one.
Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.